Now for today, we're going to be looking at subtracting rational expressions. It's kind of like when we did addition. The only thing that now the minus sign, I'm going to change it to a plus to begin with. I'm going to change it to a plus. And the negative sign, I'm going to distribute it to the second fraction. If I had more than one term, obviously distribute it to each of the terms. So now let me find my least common denominator. From the first fraction, once again, I'm just looking at the denominators here. From the first fraction, I must have x minus 1. From the second fraction, I must have x plus 1. Right. First, I look into, could I factor the denominators? I couldn't. So now my LCD, my least common denominator, should have both x minus 1 and x plus 1. So on my fraction, I'm going to have x minus 1 and x plus 1. So looking at my least common denominator, from the two parentheses that I have, the one that I'm missing on the first fraction, I'm missing x plus 1. So I'm going to multiply the top with x plus 1. Looking at my second fraction, from my LCD, from my two parentheses, the one that I'm missing is x minus 1. So I'm going to multiply the top with x minus 1. All right, let's take a look at the first fraction. Let me distribute the first x to the second parentheses. So that's going to give me x squared minus 4x. Now let me distribute the 1 to the second parentheses. It's going to give me plus x minus 4. Now let's take a look at the second fraction. The negative 4, let me distribute to the second parentheses. It's going to give me negative 4x plus 4. So I should have x minus 1, x plus 1 at the bottom. On the top, let me combine like terms. My highest exponent is x to the second. I'm just going to go x to the second. Then when it comes to x, I have negative 4 plus 1 minus 4. So that gives me negative 7x. And then when it comes to whole numbers, I have a negative 4 plus 4, which is 0. So I'm not going to write it. I'll be okay with these answers. You don't have to factor the top. Once again, you don't have to factor the top. But if you do want to factor the top, I can factor an x. So that gives me x minus 7 over x minus 1, x plus 1. You don't have to factor the top. Now, how am I going to type this? I'm just going to type in for the top. I'm going to go x squared minus 7x over. Now, at the bottom, I have two sets of parentheses. So I'm just going to write x minus 1 and x plus 1. Well, I forgot to mention that on the top, the x squared is x to the 2, right? X squared minus 7x over x minus 1, x plus 1. All right, let's take a look at question number 10. First, I want to see my denominators. I'm looking if I can factor them. Nothing I can factor. I'm seeing if I can cancel things out from the top. I cannot cancel the a plus 3 with the top because they're not exactly the same thing. So I'm just going to say my least common denominator, I need a plus 3, and I need a 5. Let's make this pen a little smaller. Okay, so from the negative side that's in between the fractions, I'll change that to a plus, and I'll distribute the negative to the second parentheses. Once again, if there's more than one term, distribute the negative sign to every term in the second fraction. All right, so from the two parentheses that I'm supposed to have on my LCD, the one that I don't have on my first fraction, it's a 5. So I'm going to multiply the first fraction by 5. From the two parentheses that I'm supposed to have on my LCD, the parentheses that I don't have on the second fraction is a plus 3. So I'm going to multiply the second fraction with a plus 3. So once again, my least common denominator is a plus 3 and 5. I'll leave it in factor form. Now looking on the top of the first fraction, let me distribute the 5. So that's going to give me 5a minus 15. Looking on the second fraction, let me distribute the negative 2a. That's going to give me negative 2a squared minus 6a. So once again, at the bottom, I have a plus 3 and 5. Now, the order that I put those two parentheses, when I have to type it, it doesn't matter. Okay, now on the top, I have many terms. What I'm going to do, I'm going to combine like terms, starting with the highest exponent. So I have negative 2a squared minus 1a. So I'm just going to write it negative a minus 15. Once again, I combine my like terms starting from the highest exponent. That's how I will write it on the test. Now, the way I will type this, on the top I have negative 2a squared minus a minus 15, close parentheses, over. Now at the bottom, let me have a whole set of parentheses, and I'm just going to have a plus 3 inside its own parentheses, and then 5 inside its own parentheses as well. There are no spaces all together. All right, let's move on to question number 11. I look at my denominators, trying to see if I can factor something in there, and I cannot. See if I can factor with anything from the top, I cannot. So then I think, all right, what's my LCD, my least common denominator? I'm just looking at my denominators. I'm going to need the v minus 3 from the bottom, from the first fraction. I'm going to need v plus 4 from the second fraction. So that's my least common denominator. From the two parentheses that I'm supposed to have, looking at my first fraction, and I say, well, from those two parentheses, I don't have the v plus 4. So I'm going to multiply the top with v plus 4. Looking at the second fraction, the parentheses that I don't have is v minus 3. Don't forget that the minus in between the fractions, I'm going to distribute it to the negative 3v. I'm going to distribute it to what I had on the top. So when I work this, my denominator is v minus 3 and v plus 4. On the first fraction, when I multiply those two out, I should get 3v plus 12. Looking at the second fraction, when I multiply those two parentheses, I should get negative 3v squared plus 9v. So my answer, I should have v minus 3 and v plus 4 as my denominator. Now on the top, let me simplify by combining like terms, starting with the highest exponent. Negative 3v squared plus 12v plus 12. I know I can factor a 3 from the top, but I will not factor it. Remember I said you don't have to factor the top. You could if you want to. Now the way I will type that, on the top I have a negative 3v to the second plus 12v plus 12 over the bottom. I'm going to have a whole set of parentheses, and I'm going to have v minus 3 and then v plus 4. Once again, no spaces. All right, let's take a look at number 12. Let me see if I can factor anything. From the bottom of my first fraction, there's nothing I can do. From the bottom of my second fraction, I can factor a 3. Now, I check on the top if I can cancel anything. In this case, I cannot. So my least common denominator will be v plus 4 and 3v plus 3. Although I wrote 3 as v plus 1, I factored the second fraction just to see if I could cancel things out. Because I cannot, I put it back as 3v plus 3. Then the minus in between the fractions, I'll change it to a plus and distribute the negative to the second fraction. All right, so now from my LCD, let me write my fraction. My least common denominator will be v plus 4 and 3v plus 3. From the two parentheses that I'm supposed to have, looking at the first fraction, from the two that I'm supposed to have, I have the v plus 4, so I'm going to multiply the top with the 3v plus 3. I multiply with the parentheses that I don't have. Looking at the second fraction, this negative 4, I'm going to multiply with v plus 4, right? The parentheses that I don't have. All right, so looking at the first fraction, when I multiply my two parentheses, that's going to give me 9v squared plus 9v. Looking at the second parentheses, that gives me negative 4v minus 16. So my answer, let me copy my denominator, v plus 4, 3v plus 3. On the top, let me combine the like terms. I have 9v squared plus 5v minus 16. That way I will type this. I have 9v squared plus 5v minus 16. Notice I'm putting everything inside inside a parentheses. I'm gonna go, this is over. The bottom, I'm gonna open a big parentheses, but inside of it, I'm gonna have a v plus 4 and a 3v plus 3. Now, one thing I do want to mention is there will be some fractions in your homework you will be able to simplify. What I mean with that is, let's say I had a fraction such that I have like 6v. Let me change this to different color. Once again, this is just an example. I'm just making this one up. I could have a fraction as 6v on the top. And then at the bottom, let me call this a 3v plus 3. When I work this out, the top I have a 6v. The bottom I can factor the 3 out. Then I notice the 6 over 3 can simplify. So I will break this as 2v over v plus 1. Once again, on your homework, you're going to have some fractions that you can simplify. So on my LCD, in this case, if I had this on my homework, the parentheses that I'm going to have on my least common denominator, in this case, is v plus 1, not 3v plus 3. The reason why I simplified it, and there was a factor that canceled out. If you have any questions, feel free to email me.